So now let's talk a little bit about the background of research in general. And to do that, let's go back in history to the earliest approaches to research. So the earliest efforts of doing research by humans were with a focus of understanding nature, understanding how nature works. And at that time, the approach was to discover how nature works, not really to understand, but more to discover, because the assumption was that nature already exists before humans, like everything was already there, like everything already existed before there is someone. So the idea was more to discover how things work and to discover things rather than to understand. So the idea was just discover nature because the nature already existed before us, so let's discover nature. And the approach to do that was basically trial and error. So we tried something and we saw the result, and then we tried to do it again if we didn't get the result. And that was kind of a very early approach to research. And as I said, the idea or the keyword is discover. That was kind of the first approach to research. And as research became more complex and humans also became more complex, then we moved a little bit more, kind of following the same idea of discovering to what we call the scientific method, which focuses on testing ideas. Maybe you have studied this in high school, I'm not sure, but the scientific method is a method that is a very systematic method that you use to test ideas, to test if something works or not. And this approach has been very successful in a lot of areas like biology, chemistry, math, physics, even economics at some point. I will talk about that in a second. And the idea is because we want to understand nature, sorry, to discover nature again. Like that's the approach of the scientific method to discover nature, and it works really well on nature sciences. And here we have a very important concept that is called the positivist paradigm, because in research philosophy, we have at least two paradigms. I'm going to explain that in a second, where on one side, we have the positivist paradigm, which is related to this, which is about discovering nature, assuming that everything is already set and our job is only to discover it. Okay, so that's kind of the positivist paradigm that we're going to study right now. And if we continue exploring the idea of this positivist paradigm, we can define it as a scientific framework that is used to do research. It's basically that. It's just a framework that you follow. I will explain in a second everything that is inside of that framework. And the name positivism, because maybe you are not familiar with the name, maybe something very new for you. It comes from the idea that we can only gain knowledge from positive information. So that means that we can only generate knowledge if we can test positively any idea. That's why we focus on trial and error, and that's why we focus on testing ideas, because we want to get a positive result, that something works, or that we actually discover something. And this is widely used in natural sciences, like I said, like biology, chemistry, math, physics, and in some social sciences too, such as economics. Is quite popular, this positivist paradigm. But I will explain in the end of this video some limitations, because as social sciences also became more complex and more relevant in the scientific world, research focused more on the social part rather than in nature. So do you remember that this positivist paradigm focuses more on discovering nature, like all of this, testing ideas from nature, discovering nature? So if the social becomes more important than the nature, then it can be a limitation from positivism, because positivism focuses on nature. And if we want to focus on the social, maybe we have some problems in there. Also, another limitation is that psychological and social processes can be impossible or very difficult to quantify objectively. And that is something also very important, because do you remember that from this paradigm, we assume that everything already exists. before humans, like everything is there. We just need to discover it. And if we think about a psychological thing like an emotion, for example, or a social process like a conversation, does that really exist before humans or without humans? Not really, right? So it's not really about discovering, it's more about understanding. So then that can be also another limitation from positivism. And finally, that in the scientific world, especially in social sciences, interpretations become more important than discoveries. So that is also quite a limitation from positivism, because positivism focuses on discoveries and not really on interpretations. So don't take me wrong. Don't end up this video thinking like positivism is the best because of this, or is the worst because of this. It's just a framework, and depending on what we want to study, we are going to choose the paradigm that we need, okay? So it's not like a team that you are going to pick one or the other. It's more about understanding the paradigms and where do we want to situate the paradigms. So in the next video, I will explain the other paradigm so you can have some balance.